Oh, yeah.
Should we turn these around?
You know, they were so you could find your seat.
It's kind of a bridal chamber. I mean, it's
Now that we're-
inconceivable to us.
That's
They'd
right.
like to do that, and sort of more or less said,
Bonnie, so she
how
can
was
know
it
who
for
you
you,
are.
sir? And nothing happened, and
If
you
you're
didn't
on,
contemplate it
if
for
you're
a
online
long
with us,
time.
please mute yourself. That would be great. Awesome. Thank you.
Precisely what was going on behind the bedroom door mystified the courtiers and divides historians.
I can do it from here. I just always like to let people have the chance.
All right, it's 5:31. We'll go ahead and start the joint meeting of the village trustees and the Morristown Select Board members. First, I'll hand it to you for introduction.
Sure. So welcome, everybody. I thought it'd be good if we go around and everybody could introduce themselves and say how many years you've been serving on your respective boards. And we can start at the head table. Jason Luno, the interim town administrator.
And Scott Johnstone, I'm the village manager.
Travis Knapp.
Richard Craig.
Bob Ingham. Don McDowell.
Tom Smith.
Judy Bickford,
Chris Palermo. Brad Limoges.
Laura Streets.
Perfect, thanks. Pardon me, what did I?
Yeah, Judy Alberry. Bonnie McDermott. And if you can just make sure Bonnie can see your name tags, Brad and Cliff. And just, you know, who's speaking when you speak, thank you.
Okay, before we start the meeting, we have a list of issues and we try to put a time limit on that, which, you know, it would take a few seconds just to make sure we're tracking. And also I just remind everybody to kind of keep it straightforward and not get into the weeds, and not repeating what's been already said before. That way we can kind of keep things moving and try to get things accomplished at this meeting. So if we're ready, we'll start with,
What are you gonna do?
yeah, we're gonna start with number one, the joint rules for subordinate boards policy. We'll go into discussion about that. You want to kick that off?
I will. This was something that, having been on both the DRB and, the planning has been a long time coming. I think there's incredible support for it from our public. Our select board supported it. I have to say I was incredibly disappointed and, rather insulted that the trustees just didn't even bother to vote on it. So I asked to table it on our end, to ask the trustees to reconsider it, because I think it's a very important policy.
Anybody else?
And specifically, Laura, you're referring to the language that would restrict the number of boards that one person could be a member of?
Yes, and again, that was so that we could open it up, so that more local residents could participate and to prevent any kind of conflict of interest. So that people wouldn't have to step off because of a conflict of interest.
Yeah, so I know I'm on record with the select board, and I'll just say it again that I think it is wise for us to think about not having select board members or trustee members sitting on the DRB and the planning or the planning council. That those be separate. And I agree, Laura. I think I've said this a lot, you know, Morristown's a big town. There's a lot of us, and there's more than enough of us to fill these boards. And I like the idea of reaching out to more individuals in town to sit on these boards rather than having one person occupy several seats. Thank you.
I, for one, don't agree with it. I believe it's restricting people. It's not like we have an influx of people to fill these positions. You still haven't filled the empty planning commission spot. When I was on the planning commission, we had to reduce it from 7 to 5 because we didn't have enough people to be on the board to maintain any kind of consistency. And I just think anytime you limit somebody or limit the voting of people in town or in village, I don't think that's a good idea. It's a waste of time. That's my opinion.
I personally am not in favor of the the policy either. Would anybody else from the trustees like to speak on it?
Say I'm not in favor of it. I think that our town size is not that big and that participants are just not out there. And so to limit them with this rule is not good.
So I guess my question then is, why would the trustees not vote on it and be noted as to whether you're for it or against it? To just not vote on it, to me, it's just an insult to the public that it's not even worth your time. I think it's an insult. So why not have a vote and then make it clear that you're not for it, so that people know, have it on record.
I don't think it was something we were required to vote on.
It's-
So
No, it's something that keeps coming up, and it's just a waste of our time to keep working on issues that don't affect the town or the village. That's not what we're here for. Besides, I trust the village, I trust the select board members to be trustworthy, and when they select people for positions and for boards. I trust the trustees that will make the right decision too. So I put my trust in those boards to make the right decisions when it comes to picking somebody for these positions. So I'm not, again, I'm not in favor of it. It's just, I like to move on to something more important. Okay, next, 2, new and emergent state energy policy impacts on town and village. And I'll ask Scott to chime in because he's kind of an expert on this.
Well, thanks. We thought it'd be good to talk about this because while we run the electric utility and the energy systems in town, with the changes that are coming, is going to impact like everybody in the village, everybody in the town. It's going to impact operations in the town. It's going to impact decisions that you need to make about what you do and don't want to be involved with. So we thought we'd just give a very quick overview and then you all can start having a conversation about it. So mostly it's predicated on a suite of laws that have recently gone in place or are in the process of going in place. So the point here isn't to get all your opinions on these laws because they're coming and they're going to happen to us. And so now the question is, what do we do about it? So the first one was the Global Warming Solution Act that passed a few years ago that really starts to push us towards really not using any fossil fuels for anything, not just electricity, but how you heat your home, how you drive your car. And you may or may not be in favor of those things. That's really not the point today, but the laws are the laws now, right? And then we've had a renewable energy standard that said we had to be like 85% by 2045 renewable with electricity. Well, everyone expects that this coming legislative session, that's now going to be 100% by 2030. So we're going to have almost no time to flip the way our system runs to be all renewable energy. At the same time, they've passed the first stage of the clean heat standard, which essentially says all heating, all hot water, and all transportation, it can no longer be fossil fuels. And essentially the law indicates that they want everything to be electrified. Now, it doesn't really, it leaves room for other ways to do it, which I'll mention to you in a minute. But essentially it's, you gotta electrify everything. And I'll give you a quick view of what that looks like. And in the meantime, the other bill that's starting to be taken up is kind of the who pays for all this bill. Love or hate net metering, putting it on your house. The way that's been designed from the beginning is that those that don't do it help pay for those that do. That's the way that the incentives have been designed. So if you're fortunate enough to put them on, you've been getting help with your bill. There's a law in the legislature to cap energy bills for low and moderate income people to a percentage of their income. So you're going to have a situation where folks with net metering aren't going to be paying the full freight. Low and moderate income folks aren't. And you're going to vastly increase the size of the electric system and have to invest tens of millions of dollars. And the people in the middle are the ones that are going to have to pay for it. That's essentially where the state laws are going, either already are or are going. In the middle of all that, we're developing our kind of companion document to the town plan, which is called an integrated resource plan. So where are we going to get, how are we going to make this all happen? It's a 30-year plan we have to do every 3 years. We're in the middle of that, but essentially we're realizing we're going to commit to 100% by 2030 because we have to. That's going to mean battery storage. We also looked at if you really did make us electrify everything, what happens to our electric system? And it doesn't matter if you know what a megawatt is because it's all relative. Right now, our peak load is 8.5 megawatts. If you electrify everything and you don't control it in any way, where it will be at 29. So just from a sense of scale, how many times over that increases, we'll be at 29. If you could perfectly use the same amount of energy every hour of the year, we'd be at 19. So we'll probably be like 22 or 23, so almost triple, which means every transformer, every wire, every substation, everything has to be upgraded. And we got to buy renewable energy contracts for all of that. So we'll be investing, at least 50 million, if not 100, into the system in the next 20 years. In a utility that has a budget of $7 million a year. So just it's really just to have you understand it. And then the key is this includes, for example, electric vehicles as part of it. So now the town will have pressure about every parking lot ought to have charging stations in it, right? So we'll provide the power. You don't have to do it, but you'll have pressure coming at you for that. Most businesses will be looking for a partner to help them figure out how to do it. So these issues are very quickly going to start coming at us all. We have some responsibility. People will probably try to pull you into it. You have choices to make as a select board. Doesn't mean you have to. And the same will be true of how are people going to get their heat. Mostly all of the advertising is that electric heat pumps work no matter what the temperature is. And honestly, if it's much below 0, much below 10 above, their effectiveness goes down really quick. Unless you have a super insulated home and you're relying and you don't have a backup heating system, you're going to be cold. You're not going to freeze to death, but you're going to be cold if that's all you rely on. So, we may have to talk about as a joint village in town, putting thermal energy networks in certain parts of town, whether in new development, or you can put some geothermal heat pumps in, put in 2 or 3 to heat the whole new development, or the downtown area as a way not to electrify that. And because geothermal will work at any temperature, it's wonderful technology, just capital intensive. So we're gonna have to look at all these things. And the other thing I would say is, now that the state has an appetite for mandates, both in energy and in zoning, as I'm sure Todd has told you about the zoning mandates, you shouldn't expect the state to stop overreaching and start telling us what we have to do. So don't be surprised if all of a sudden these energy laws trip into housing policy. And all of a sudden you have a statewide mandate to say you must require in your planning process. So that's probably plenty for me to say to set the table for you. We're going to spend a lot of money. It's going to drive some cost, and it's going to include us all.
So Scott, so you mentioned 85% in 2024, and then perhaps
2045. That's what the current law says.
2045?
Yeah.
But then they're gonna go to 100%
By 2030.
2030, you think?
That's what all the tea leaves would say.
What are we now?
We're around 70.
70? And I guess the question I have, when I think of energy and I think of Morrisville Electric, first I wish I was on it, but that would be nice for my monthly bill. But when I think about Morrisville Light, I think about the trustees, then I'll think about the select board. So what do you see as something that the select board should be thinking about when it comes to the electrification of Morrisville?
I think definitely what role is there for public charging, EV charging, because the public's going to start asking, how do you collaborate with your businesses in town? Because it's not just going to be in the village, it's going to be in the town. Are there places where we should be collaborating, and whether through development rules or rules of the town, to create these thermal energy networks? What role do we have in that? We don't have to be the implementer, but we might need to enable it if we want to lower how much we have to build out our electric system, and make sure that the heat actually works as opposed to what's being pushed on people now. So I think it's things like that, and it certainly is going to impact your operations because your costs are going to go up. It would seem pretty obvious to me that when you start having a mandate to get rid of all fossil fuels, that the cost of those fossil fuels is likely to go down at that point, because there'll be fewer people offering them. There'll be less competition. It won't be anything they want to do as a business, but as it starts to take hold, there's just going to be less competition because there's going to be less people able to survive it in a normal supply demand thing, right?
Yeah. And talking to our legislators would obviously be important with all of this.
Definitely, we gotta be making sure they're aware so that there's some voices other than the advocates. Talking to them, as you probably know, I've spent a lot of time in the legislature in my career and, you know, it's a beautiful thing that we have a citizen legislature who really just, in theory, listens to people and come to a conclusion. And they don't have staff essentially. The problem is, therefore, when they need their technical information, they typically get it from advocates, you know, well-paid advocates and lobbyists who, you know, give them information. And they don't have a lot of other places to turn to get information to compete with that. So it's really important for towns and villages and others to be letting local legislators know what we want.
So the last thing I would say is kind of leading up to that is, I know you were there last year. I saw you at the breakfast with the legislators. It is a wonderful time for all of us to go and see our legislators. We do have their ears. There's no doubt about that. They are listening and it's good conversation. Great for those are coming up starting in January.
Can I ask about smart meters? Is going forward that we're gonna have to get off fossil fuels? Brings up the current driving around. Are you guys looking to, start transitioning and encouraging that with new development? As
Yeah.
opposed to having to,
We're gonna have to start that. We are gonna have smart meters on our system in another year. In part because we got 50% of the money from COVID money, which is still our money, but it doesn't come to Morrisville. It's going to someplace in Texas or Oklahoma. So,
yeah,
so we are doing that, but we're gonna have to figure out how to start encouraging, helping people with this transition because we're gonna get a lot of questions
yeah,
about how do I do this?
yeah, the conversion.
Chris, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Scott, when you talk about $50 million, $100 million to upgrade your system here in Morrisville, you know, as a utility in this area, you know, other municipalities like Stowe have their electric companies, and then you look at Green Mountain Power and Belco. How does, you know, these timelines and this expense get realistic in terms of meeting those guidelines? I mean, to me, I knew that the legislature, I'm a lobbyist in Montpelier as well. The legislature draws this line in the sand and says, these are the mandates that we're handing down. But the reality is that when you put it on the ground,
Right.
you know, where does that go? And do you think it's realistic, these expectations for all these utilities?
It's realistic at a price is what I would say. So we can go purchase what are called power purchase agreements with offshore wind off of Massachusetts or in Houston, Texas, or wherever. We can acquire renewable energy with renewable energy credits. You have to pay a price for those. To do it smart, to do it kind of the Vermont way, where we're trying to, you know, do the smartest economic thing we can, even within that box, which is, you know, some more local generation, working with people, trying to really find the best price, will take longer. Can we get there by 2030? Absolutely. If they're gonna mandate it, we can get there. It'll drive rate increases. It'll cost money. Sorry to be the bearer of wonderful news, but.
Yeah, reality often is.
Yeah. Number 3 on the list is local option tax. I know Tom, when we were putting this together, Tom and I were talking, it sounds as if both groups are interested in exploring this option. But if people want to speak to it, please feel free.
I have been talking about local option tax with certain departments here in our municipality. We cannot continue to do the things that we need to do infrastructure wise in the town without a different revenue source. And if you take a look at Morristown's sales and use tax, rooms and meals tax, the alcohol tax. If we took a look at, you know, a local option tax on those gross receipts based on 2022 annual calendar year, with our 70% share of that, we'd be raising about $930,000.
And that's the only way that we as a municipality, in my opinion, are gonna be able to do paving, roads, buildings, all of the infrastructure things that are important for this municipality to move forward. And I don't see any reason why we shouldn't advocate this strongly as we move into town meeting. I would like to see the town develop their own charter, and it would be a really simple charter dealing with just local option tax to begin with. And it can always be amended in successive legislative years. But I think the time is here. I think it's a really important piece of our ability to move forward. And I don't see any other way unless we find a different revenue source.
We also used to have an equipment tax. They ended in 2018. That used to bring in over $100,000.
Right.
Excuse me. And when they did away with it, they were supposed to move towards a sales tax, but they never did.
Right.
So I wouldn't be opposed to bringing the equipment tax back either.
I think that the advantage of a local option tax is the fact that there's two data points. One is just the dollars it generates, but I think the biggest piece of this is where do those tax dollars come from? And so what we're in the process of doing is delineating the non-resident resident revenue. And that's the data that we need, because if 85% of this tax revenue comes from Morristown residents, I think we need to take a good hard look at that. But if 65 or 70% of that tax revenue comes from people outside our municipality, they use our roads, they use our sidewalks, they use our infrastructure. I think that that's a key component of this. And if it comes to fruition the way I think it might, I would really strongly say that $932,000 is a lot of money that can get us, and that's on an annual basis, once it's up and running. We can accomplish some serious things in this town and get some control over our tax rate.
Well, I'm totally in favor of, partially in favor of this certainly for the Airbnbs. We don't have a lot of hotels that will be impacted. But certainly Airbnbs, and we all know that that is all tourist money. I think, there's been some talk that we could actually get this to go forward sooner than we had thought. And I think if we did initiate this, that we should not do, restaurants. And I know this is tricky in talking with Todd, is that part of the, interest was because of the grocery stores, and indeed, we have a huge group of people that come in for the grocery stores, but we need to not we don't have a lot of restaurants, and I feel unfortunately that this tax would hurt our local restaurants. And so it's a real tricky thing, because I understand the grocery stores, and I don't know if there's a way to, separate out just restaurants. Because I agree with but we're really at a point where we don't have any restaurants. Hoagie's never reopened. Our restaurants are struggling, and across the country, they're talking about people are not spending. So if there's any way we cannot do restaurants initially and wait till everything comes back. And so I think looking at a rollout, a way to roll it out or somehow is what I'd like to encourage.
How does that affect the business? I mean, what burden would that be on the business to do this?
So anything that's computerized, they would have to, retool how they charge that 1% tax. But multiple municipalities, I mean, we're not recreating the wheel here in any way. Many municipalities, Stowe is the closest one here to us that does all of the taxes, including sales and use. Have accomplished this, and I think that they are ahead of the curve. I'm not sure what the overall dollar value would be. I'm assuming it might be more of a burden, so to speak, for grocery chains like Hannaford or Price Chopper. But I think for individual businesses, I mean, if the sales tax goes up or alcohol tax goes up, they have to reboot their system. So it's not, I don't think it's rocket science for any of them. I can't imagine it would be any kind of
Financial burden.
financial burden either. And, you know, if you take a look at the tax data, you know, all of Morristown, Stowe, I mean, if you go back to 2021, there's been an intimation a number of times in our board meetings that somehow businesses are struggling economically. And if you look back at tax data all the way to 21, 22, 23, which encompasses part of COVID, all those tax revenues are up in all areas. So our economy is doing well here in Morristown.
Well, and everybody should keep in mind that this would even affect the food trucks. So any food truck that came in would also have to pay this extra 1%. And again, it does impact because that means with the current cost of food prices, you know, that $17 burger just went up because you've added tax. So to dismiss it and to not realize that if you go out to any of our businesses, they're not doing well. The restaurants are, I mean, they're surviving, but they're not flourishing. So that's my part.
Anybody else? Just want to say one thing. We said some audience members raising their hand. We're going to save comments till the end.
Okay,
So
no problem. We can move on to downtown designation, and under that, you'll
Before you do
notice.
that, Judy, if
I'm
you could
sorry?
also just, and Judy, I'll be very, correct me if I'm wrong, like, you know, Judy brought in some snacks and things, and so people should feel free to just get up and, is that right? So please, you all, the public, like, that's what it's here for. So please do, otherwise she has to take it all home.
And I'm on a diet,
Thank you, sorry, Judy.
along with several others.
Have your light is, you've got a flashing, do you want to sit on the end? Because it's really distracting for me to constantly have a flashing light at. I'm sorry, it's.
So, downtown designation, and under that, we put town plan, village town boundary, town charter / village charter, and Airbnb impacts. So we've lumped those all under the downtown designation. So, I can start off by the downtown designation, and, it goes with the town plan. We have to re-amend, that's not the right word. We have to amend the town plan in order to then go forward to apply for downtown designation. And amending the town plan would require, I believe it's 1 or 2 sentences or a couple of words in the town plan that can be amended then to resubmit it.
I fully support looking at downtown designation again. I know, you know, in my years in Waterbury on the select board, Waterbury has downtown designation that opens up a whole world of revenue in that area. And I think that the grant process and other revenue sources that come, state and federal, it's an opportunity that we're missing, and I think it would be a shame for us not to really drill down and take another hard look at that.
Judy, and this is on here. When I came on the select board a year and a half ago, the trustees and the select board have been through several iterations of the town plan.
42.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was gonna turn to Todd, I was gonna say 30 some odd, but 42. And it became pretty clear that people were getting a little annoyed, is perhaps a nice way of saying it. You know, looking at all the changes. And I don't think my vote was put anything over the top, but I did vote to push the town plan through, but I also said that same night. And I asked before I voted for it, can we amend this? And it was made very clear to me that, yeah, we can amend it. So I agree, Judy, it would be nice to go back and amend the town plan. Look at doing what needs to be done to get it through. I believe LCPC is partially what's stopping us at this point. And and make ourselves available for downtown designation. There's a whole lot of things we're missing out on right now. Grant money in particular, there's a lot of grant money that we're missing out on. Talking about revenues, we're talking about revenues right now. There's a lot of grant money that came in years ago to help with a number of things around town. So I'd like to look at reinstating that.
I know that, Anna, our new, recreation director, was going to be applying for some grants. I was unable because we don't have a downtown designation, so there are grants available and that possibly there's money available right now. I don't know how long it's going to last, how much grant money is going to last, so we want to kind of jump on this as quickly as we can and take advantage of the money that's available.
And my understanding is, I know, Jason and I've talked about it quite a few, and it's actually a fairly simple process it's not as laborious as we had previously thought. So it could happen pretty quick it's just a matter of some words. So it's not a whole revision and having to go through major votes and stuff. Am I correct, Jason?
Fairly, I mean, it's an amendment. It still
Yeah.
has to be warned, for us and the trustees, planning council.
So
I mean,
there's
it's still,
some procedural.
I don't think it's something that can happen in 2 months. But
And, okay,
I'm all for it too. I just have a couple of questions, 'cause I know, and Todd, you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but Act 250 gets waived or a lot of this stuff. Like, if we get a town designation, then instead of going to a 16-unit apartment, we can go to a 32. Is that correct, or something along that line?
Threshold limit is correct.
And that's my concern, is that being done in the town, doubling the amount that can be built. I don't know if that's a good thing, it's a bad thing, I don't know, but it's something I wanna kind of bounce off everybody, because I think the downtown designation is good, but if it has something, it's the Act 250, that's something to think about. Don't know if maybe that's something we can amend down the road too.
Yeah,
And I'm not sure, I just wanna bring that up.
That's a good point.
so going on to, I'm not quite sure what the town charter or village town boundary. Someone wants to speak to that?
I think that came off the trustees list, and it was an earlier list, when at one point I know there was a idea being floated that to accommodate the charter issue, that, there was this idea that you'd amend the select board was interested in amending the boundaries of the village. And then changing our charter to include the ability to raise the local option tax. I don't know if that's still a current proposal or not, but that's where I believe this came from.
Todd, is this not, the discussion of, extending the village to include a little more property for, the areas that already have sewer lines run? Increasing the village lines, because now we have,
If you're doing your own separate charters, I don't think you need to discuss playing with the town village boundary lines.
so this was,
Yeah,
okay,
I
think
think this
so.
is a
Is that
moot
right?
topic. 'cause you've all
Okay.
go your own way.
great,
I think it is too, because the town's researching their own charter
Okay.
as we speak. So.
all
The
right,
big
great.
picture would be great to be one community, there are efficiencies and cost savings there, but for what you're doing right now, this is a moot point.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, and then the other would be, so we've kind of talked about the charter already. I don't know if anyone wants to talk about that anymore.
Well, I've been in favor of a town charter, and we did look at, options. And again, I think this is something we've discovered can happen sooner than later also. It opens up lots of things I would like to, there's a few other things I'd like to add that other towns are already doing. I am in agreement with Chris that we keep it simpler and not start adding things that require reinventing the wheel, but there are a lot of things that are already very established policies in other towns that we could put onto the town plan, and like maybe 2 or 3 to get it passed, because I think it would be really, really beneficial for us. I think we need to go that area.
We haven't heard a lot from Travis or Bob or Richard or Brad. Do anything to add to anything we've talked about so far? Because we kind of we're going through our timelines pretty quickly. You're happy?
Next.
We have Airbnb impacts, like Laura kind of alluded to that. Does anyone have any? And I know, Tom, when you were talking about this, you feel it's mainly impacting the town and less the village.
So I believe the town has more Airbnb than the village does.
So you have different rules.
Definitely not.
I'm sorry,
You have different rules.
I think our rules are the same,
No,
no?
they are now, but for
Oh,
5 years they weren't.
They weren't, yes.
More restricted than the village.
I think
You had rules, we didn't.
Exactly.
Yes.
the other piece of this, because I think, again, this came from the trustees, but it's a list from like 3 or 4 months ago, is there was, the trustees had some interest in talking about this because of a quote, I'll get the percentage wrong, but Todd had talked about the rate of growth of Airbnbs. And so there's this housing crisis in Vermont, right? And yet we have all this development, but if a big percentage of them are all getting converted to Airbnbs, there's nowhere for local people to live, even if you have a whole lot of new housing development. So I think that was also part of, and again, it's less a village issue, we think, than the town issue. But I think that was the other angle. And do you remember the quote? I'm putting you on the spot. It was like 8 months ago. You
Yeah,
gave
no,
some big quote.
It's significant though.
Yeah.
And we tamped that down with the new rules, especially on town growth, the explosion of Airbnbs in the town. The town was unregulated for years. But since we've had the regulations in the town, the growth rates almost plateaued.
Good.
It's still growing because you can still have an Airbnb as long as it's your one Vermont property. So we're still seeing conversions, but the rate is dramatically decreased.
It was just something to watch, I think. But trustees, I'm picking up on things that you all talked about. So trying to refresh your memory. It was a long time ago.
I'm happy that the town finally joined the village in restricting and regulating the Airbnbs.
Very quickly, I would agree. I'm very glad that the town is on the same page with the village.
I am too. I fought hard for a long time for it, and living in the town, it's made a significant difference in the neighborhoods.
Going to number 5. Coordination of highway, sewer and water, none of that, under that we put coordination of utility works. So I think they all kind of go together.
We'll put you on the spot. We FaceTiming over there. Just talking about coordination with the town and the utilities and the village, just working that relationship out. I don't know. I don't think there's any big issues. I just want to make sure that we're kind of aware of what we're all doing, because we have to start a project and find out, well, we got to dig up the road to get the water line in, and then that doesn't really, it's either slows down the project or adds money to it. And I just think just making sure we're all on the same page on any new development or any anything new come to town or any kind of changes that's going to affect both the village and the town.
A particular example, just to put it on the table, is, and Kevin, correct me if I get the wrong street, but I think, the plan has been for a couple of years we have a lot of work to do on Best Street, and the pavement more resembles rubble than pavement at this point. And so I think, that it's just an example of, we ought to make sure, I think at this point, we're wondering which year you're gonna be paving that. Because no point in us finishing the destruction of the street and then letting you sit there for 3 years, so it's just an example, but those sort of things, and I think Kevin would agree, we have a great relationship with Kevin on your staff, and we talk about these things, but just want to make sure that we're always communicating about these things.
So on that note, Scott, does Kevin attend trustee meetings?
Our Kevin or your Kevin?
Our Kevin.
Our Kevin does. Our Kevin does.
He's there
Two
sometimes.
Kevins, Kevin Farrell.
No, it's more that the two Kevins talk and compare notes, and hopefully that, I think the point here is we gotta make sure that gets light of day to both boards, right? So that you're aware that the coordination is happening and that our capital plans are in sync. I think that's the point, right?
And especially with the budget, being the way it is,
Yeah.
we might not have the funds to do something that we'd have to come and contract out. So that's, which is fine, but we just, that coordination is a big way, so.
Is there any kind of coordination as far as when permits are issued? Do any of you guys kind of review permits just to see developments? I'm sure you do, yeah.
Yeah, Todd sends us a list.
Yeah.
Monthly, I think. Monthly, he sends
Yeah,
us
so
a list of development, and frankly, if something is really going on that he he kind of keeps his eye open for us. I won't say he catches 100%, but he catches most of them.
Okay.
If even before he sends us the monthly list,
Yeah, I
he'll,
figured.
if something comes in and he knows we're gonna have heartburn, he calls me and
Okay,
says, hey, you might want to look at this.
great.
Which is great. We really appreciate that partnership.
Can I ask you a question about, is the village using any type of an app or a mapping system that shows where you're working and what you're doing?
We have systems like that. We're not using it for capital improvements yet.
Okay.
But we could add a layer someday. Kevin's been learning how to do that the last 2 days, so, so we'll probably get there.
Does the state system not pick up some of our local,
I don't believe so.
when the whole flood thing was happening, you could go on and get the roads that were,
Those are usually state roads,
you know, state.
I believe.
All right, moving on. Next topic.
Statewide zoning impacts.
So that's 100.
That's 100
This
west.
is another step toward standardizing zoning for municipalities throughout the state. And we started seeing this back when they required towns to be a part of regional planning commission years ago. And here we are. It's an overlord piece of this stuff. I don't really know what to do about it, but it's here and it's not gonna get any better. I mean, Scott's referred to it in terms of utilities. We're gonna see this more in our zoning and, you know, it's disturbing on a number of levels. Because basically they're saying, this is what you need to do and or this is what you have to do, and you're gonna have to curtail your zoning to meet these requirements. And, it's just, it's, again, it's disturbing. I'm at a loss really to know what to do about it.
I guess the question is, what should we be? What should we know that we have to do and what should we know what we don't have to do right now at this phase? Cause I'm not sure when it takes effect, really when the actual effective date is, and then if we don't comply, what happens? So I'm not sure of what we need to be doing and not doing in preparation for this new change.
And perhaps, you know, Todd can speak to it. I mean, S-100 is about 100 pages long and it's pretty extensive. I don't know what the timeline is to adjust, you know, local zoning bylaws to match this stuff. I know some of it's particularly the duplex and rather than a single family home is part of the proposals that we're going to be talking about tonight. Todd, do you have an idea?
I think the planning council and I have a pretty good handle on it at this juncture. We discussed it a few times. I've actually condensed the entire law, which you said is thick, it's this, into nine point to-do list. We talked about that last night. One of the main things that will require you all to work together is if we're gonna change our source of risk management area, because the way the law works, for those who don't know, F-100 made single-family zoning illegal in Vermont. It's illegal to just restrict the single-family zoning. And in a village setting where there's water and sewer, it's 4 units minimum, unless you're smart about it. We think we have a way to be smart about it. We'll see about that, to keep it to single-family. There's always a way around rules. Work with them. That's probably a better way to say it. But the bill does take away local control, especially in terms of where water and sewer is present. So where the village has infrastructure, it takes away some local control. So we can look at different ways to do lot sizes or different ways to restrict or shrink our source service management area. It's a zoning layer we have right now that says where sewer lines can go and not go. Never really been enforced. It's just there. I updated it, but we may have to work with the trustees on that to right size it if we want to. Because one of the bigger issues we're potentially seeing is this: the trustees may not want future sewer extensions or water extensions of the town. That's a big issue for the town in terms of growth, because if there's no sewer extensions of town, you guys aren't gonna be groundless growth after next year. You may have negative groundless growth, you may shrink. It's really impactful. It's probably the most important thing that I talk about tonight is the sewer extension, the water extension piece. And it stays in the village. That means all the projects that are coming up online, they're all dead, that are in the town. The village can keep going, but the town can't. So maybe the village and town needs to talk about Sewer service management agreement, St. Albans did that. The new person the town select board is working for the special projects actually championed that agreement in St. Albans, where the town helps pay the village for its sewer allotments, how that structure worked. We may need to do something here at this point, but that's part of what's gonna drive, that will be driven by S100. I think we have ways to avoid that, but I think it's a discussion that has to be had and be on the table. But
So
overall, in the big picture, before I start, we're gonna be doing S100 this winter into the spring. We're expecting the legislature to tweak it, and we'll be live with, to accommodate any changes. So we're not gonna push forward a zoning proposal in February, for example, and have the legislature tweak something in March or April when they close up the session. So we'll be live when they're live. As soon as they're done, there are no tweaks, there are no veto sessions. We'll push forward all the S100 corrections to the select board and trustees for approval. Hopefully that will go efficiently. We'll see.
So they're not restricting waters or septic and wells in the outlying areas?
No, just the outlying areas, it's duplexes now. There's no such thing as single family zoning, everything's a duplex.
Even in like a 2-acre lot?
Correct, even in a 50-acre lot.
But I don't understand, it's confusing because the state doesn't want sprawl.
The state just got something. I agree with you.
Okay,
So one of the things the planning council is looking at, for example, 2-acre lots, we may make them 4-acre lots. So the planning council has been very careful to put density in the village and keep the countryside as rural as possible. So if we don't want the state S100 Act to basically double the density of the town in areas like Sterling Valley, Mud City, or Elmore Mountain Road, where we want it to remain rural, we may increase the lot size to basically cut off S100 at the knees. So it's a 4-acre lot now instead of 2-acre lots with density neutral. That's something the planning council may consider and may put forth on your table for approval for both boards.
The only thing I would add to what Todd said is, which he probably didn't say because you already know, but just to remind you, you have the first piece of S100 in front of you now in the current zoning changes, which is the parking change, which is really a proposal designed for Winooski and Burlington, where they have, fixed transit service with short headways, where you can have fewer cars per unit, but it's been applied statewide. And so that's in the zoning change. That was the one thing that has to be done, to your timeline question, has to be done by the end of the year. I think is that the right time?
Pretty much everything's live at this point now. A lot of it came live on July 1st, I think it was September, but everything is live at this juncture.
There's a few things that aren't until next year.
Yeah, there's a few other things that aren't local zoning stuff.
But
Local
that
zoning pieces
one,
are live.
you've all had your public hearing, so I know at our next trustee meeting, they'll be theoretically voting on the zoning changes, including the parking one, so.
And as long as we all match what we're doing, the trustees want to approve the zoning of the parking changes, that's okay. I'll still have to deal with S100, but the select board just has to match their vote. So if you don't, the select board wants to keep the parking changes and the trustees don't, it's a good time to talk about it. Because ultimately your votes need to match on the 1st of November, then the 7th of November, or 6th of November, when the select board meets.
And I didn't raise it because I know that the trustees are against it. I just wanted to make sure you were aware it's on the table.
we don't have a choice, do we?
It's the law. I mean, if you vote it down, I'll put in the next zoning change too. I mean, it is the law. So for example, even though we're not live with duplexes in town, I got my third application today to approve a duplex. I'm approving the duplex, even though our current zoning doesn't support it. I have to comply with the law. So whether you guys approve or don't approve the parking changes, I'm still gonna regulate at 1 parking space per unit. So if you want to kind of stick your thumb at the state and say, we don't like your mandates from Montpelier, go forward, I'm good with it, I'll back you up 100%, but I'm still gonna abide by the law. We're now at 1 parking space per dwelling unit, whether we like it or not.
So I guess it begs the question, how do the trustees feel about the proposed zoning bylaw?
We voted now, I'd vote yes. The thing about the 1 parking spot, when I first heard it, I thought you could only have 1 parking spot. No, you can only mandate 1 parking spot. You can have as many parking spots as
Right.
you want to use the land for.
Right.
So my first impression was I was against it. If you can have as many parking spots as you have land for, I'm fine with it. So yeah, I would vote for it as it is right now.
The entire package that's been presented.
Yeah.
How do the rest of you feel about it?
That was all our sticking points in that.
And Todd, is anything grandfathered here? Or is everything like the developments that we currently have in town that require 1.5, does it all go to 1 now?
They can come back and revise their permit and go to 1, but it's really not a concern for me. The larger developments, like the one by Bob's house, for example, that aren't downtown, oversupply their parking. They're not doing 1 minimum. They have 1.5 to 2 parking spaces per unit, so I'm not super concerned about it. The only issue is our downtown sharing the parking lot and capacity there, but that's not S100 change. That's just a management for the town select board issue. So
But the current permit holders can come back
they
and
could, yes. They could
change
come
it.
back and try to develop their parking lots where they have extra parking if they wanted to. I don't foresee that as a reality, but I can't predict the future.
I'll just say this, it just hurts me because it doesn't affect Elmore, doesn't affect Hyde Park, doesn't affect Woolgate, all that, just Morrisville is affected by this because and we're being penalized for having infrastructure, and to me, it just, besides being an overreach, I think there's just another kick in the old gut.
Yeah.
So, that's it. All right, what do we have next? Anybody else, to say? All good?
Oh, pretty fast.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, number 7, last one, village separating from the town and forming a city.
Vegas.
There was some rumors going around that the select board and the town wanted to absorb the village and take the infrastructure. And I suggested at a meeting, why don't we do what Essex did? The town can have the town and we'll have the village, it'll become a city. So
That's where it came from.
that's where it came from.
We were wondering where it came from.
To talk about ending the village ends, to talk about that.
Do you have any information on it? Like what it requires or benefits or anything like that?
No, I'm sure I could find out.
I mean, I don't have a desire, but I'm just curious if there's any.
No, I
information.
mean, the village owns the infrastructure, the town doesn't.
Right.
That's what this was all about.
I know in Waterbury, we had duplications and everything from zoning to highway to fire departments, two distinctly separate municipalities, and the village trustees were also overseers of water and sewer. And we merged all of the departments. So essentially, the village owned assets in terms of real estate as well as the utilities. Several years, probably 3 years ago, the village decided to disband. There was an agreement made between the town and the village in terms of the real estate assets and cash assets. They worked out a mutual agreement on how they would be handled. The village essentially became a utility district. And own and operate that in perpetuity. The town had no desire. It's functioned really well that way as a utility district for over a century now. I guess it just depends at some point whether the village see themselves in that vein or not. But I've never, I guess considered or thought that the town would become the state and be an overlord of the village assets or their utilities, so.
Well, I guess the question is, are you really considering this, or was this just a?
That was a reaction to the considerations I was hearing around town.
Just clearing the air.
Yeah, I think that's what's important to know that, yeah.
Safe to say it hasn't come from the select board in the last year and a half. It might be before that, but.
I think there was some talk before that. Yeah.
And we merged the highway department probably 25 years ago.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you have a town highway department, a town fire department. There's some duplicity in terms of appointing members of, zoning and stuff, but, yeah, I mean, I think that, if it's not broken, why fix it, I guess.
But I'm looking at some of the topics that were brought up, especially number 2, the new and emergent state energy policy impact that it sounds like the select board needs to look at. don't know how going forward, but it looks like we need to look at that on an agenda item at some point. And then, we'll be looking at the, local option tax and the town plan. And I guess the statewide zoning, which that'll be its own entity coming from the planning council, basically. The public charging, I didn't see what that was coming under. Oh, that's gonna be the public charging stations, collaboration and businesses. That's all the new emergent state rules, I think. That's what that's coming under. Yeah.
You have time for that. That's not urgent. That's more like visioning for you for what's coming at you. It's not urgent for this or next year.
But when should it start being, start being looked at?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we should start working more with on the planning council, because that's where the first pressure is gonna come.
Okay,
For these things is, new development or redevelopment, it's gonna more start there. And we're starting to have some businesses approach us about, what would it take for us to add vehicle charging? So
Mhm.
you might start getting those requests, so.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be the early stuff, but it's, again, I'm guessing most of that would be planning council stuff first. That's where you probably want it to go, I'm guessing, but eventually it will come to you. As the community, the folks that deal with the businesses and, it'll start showing up in lots of places.
so that's good to know. It's for direction that it has a place to start. Great. What about, the new and emergent state energy policy? More, what we're talking about is things that we can do, but this other doesn't, it sounds pretty abstract.
Other than what Don mentioned, which is make sure that, to the extent that you have any concerns about this stuff, that, the more that you can talk to your legislators, the better off we all are. And if you decide you're interested in that and you want, like kind of cheat sheet, just tell me, I write them for the trustees all the time. So, so happy to be helpful in putting together kind of what the key issues are for them to be aware of. So when they get the deluge of, here's what you have to do from out of state lobbyists, sometimes that they have some information about what people at home want. Right?
Would you be willing to do that for us, George?
Yeah,
I think that ought to be on our
Yeah.
stuff to do list.
Yeah,
Absolutely happy to.
that sounds great.
Be very interesting.
We have time. Does anybody?
I just want to give Trish a minute to speak.
Sure, just to follow it down. I would like to go back to this 1% option tax that we're talking about, and that we're floating around the table here. We talked about this as like how this would affect our businesses. We pay that tax. This is not gonna affect our businesses negatively by any means. This is a win-win situation. I mean, I was recently in Stowe, and Sarah McCain, who does their planning, said, why are you even going round and round about this? I mean, this should be a given to all of you. Like, you have to remember, this isn't, our restaurants aren't gonna hurt from this. They're gonna be collecting it from everyone who comes in. And I hear what you're saying, Laura. I don't agree with you about our local restaurants. There may be a few that are not doing so well, but most of our restaurants you go in right now, there is waiting lines, and you can go right through them. I mean, I don't know how many of you eat out, but go to Deb's place in the morning. Go to Hoagie's. The other day, there was a line out the door at Hoagie's. I mean, these are just little town restaurants. I don't see, and I have not heard of any restaurants in this town that are not doing very well. Just my own thought, but the option, I think we all should be on that page. That is a big revenue source for this community, that it could do a lot of good moving forward.
Thanks, Trish.
Thank you.
Okay. If there's nothing here, we can open up to the public.
Well, is there anything else that's not on the list that anyone wants to bring forward?
One question, I don't know if there's any way that we can join forces to kind of advocate against some of these mandates. If we have some power all coming together to try to get in front of some of these rather than waiting for them to hit us. So if anybody has any suggestions on thoughts about trying to get in front of some of these mandates, you know, and maybe a course of action to advocate to prevent it would be huge.
I think I would say we already talked about being in touch with legislators, but I think between folks like Todd and I and Trish and others, you know, we hear, maybe not as soon as we should, but we hear what's going on down there.
Yeah.
And so making sure you're all aware so that, you know, occasionally, you know, someone from the select board or the trustees actually can go and testify.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that is, you know, you know, those two mechanisms, talking quietly to legislators and
Mhm.
then testifying at the committees is how the legislators get information from real Vermonters
Yeah.
that are actually gonna be impacted. And I don't mean to say that lobbyists are not real Vermonters, most of them are, but they're real Vermonters who are paid to push a certain perspective, not necessarily good or bad for the state. It's just their job. You also have a job, as select board members and trustees, to push a certain perspective, which is what's right for this community. So there ought to be balance in that and what they hear, right? That's the point. And what we can, Todd certainly, I'm sure through his, he'll hear about what they're talking about down there about the next intrusion from zoning. You know, the daughter of Act 100.
The
He'll hear about that.
legislators were not responsive to me last year. One never responded and one only got back to me was patronizing is probably not the right word, but it's the only word I can come up with on F-100.
So is there a way for us to find out when we can go testify? Is there a
Yep.
schedule somewhere? I
Schedule, and we'd have to help you find all of that, but yeah, they usually post schedules on like a Monday for committee meetings that week. It doesn't mean that they always hold exactly, and usually you'll reach out and ask to be on the witness list, and most of the time you'll get you, particularly if you're a town official, they're pretty deferential to letting town officials testify. Well, remember, the chair of every committee kind of runs their committee, so not all chairs run by the same rules, so just saying that out loud, but most of the time, they do want to hear from you when you represent a community.
So,
And you said you do this business, so if I've got it wrong, by all.
no,
means.
you don't. And, so the two things occur to me. One is that legislature goes back into session the first week of January. So if there's a stuff to do list for our legislators, would it make sense for us to have another joint meeting and invite the legislators here and have a sit down with them so that they can become advocates on one end of it? In terms of when they go into session, every day there's an introduction of bills both in the Senate and the House. So you can track every day, everything that's introduced on both sides of the legislature. And I think that, you know, whether it's a select board member and a trustee that does that, so that we're aware of any introductions, because that's where it begins. And then you reach out to the clerk of the committee, tell them what you want to speak to, and then you can either do it by Zoom or in person. And then you go and represent, but that's the process.
Thank you.
Sorry.
You want to take that?
Yeah, okay, we'll go ahead and go, open it up to public comment. Just remind everybody, you'll have 2 minutes. Comments, and then, if you want to speak again, just please wait for the other people to talk, and then you can speak again. Judy or Bonnie will be
I have it.
the 2-minute timer.
Do they need to approach the speaker?
I don't know, do they need to approach a speaker?
You're gonna be back there, just use your outside voice. If you don't have an outside voice, kind of step up between Don and Bob. And because this is very sensitive, to that. And the only thing I would add, Tom, just they'll want to know who you are, so your name would be important to say as well.
Yeah.
Won't take 2 minutes. Thank you for that. Walk up. You talk quietly. I know that.
Some people just do that, but anyway, thank you very much. Yeah, I'll be real quick.
What's your name?
My name's Tom Cludia, and I live in Morrisville, Morristown. And I appreciate you opening up to the public. And one thing I would just real quickly, and I'll get through, is once the talk about the city, a few that was in the air. Well, what is in the air with a few of the town residents is the question of merging. It would appear to me, and but first look at this, it would save every town taxpayer money over a period of time if the town merged like Essex. So what I'm requesting is from the department head, if I could get, the cons and the pros and cons of a merge of the village to the town. And I know that it would take a petition, 5 years to get it done. But, I would like to know and have your input. I know Scott gave me a very elaborate, insight into the history of the town, and I appreciate that very much. But, it's in the air, that's all. Thank you very much.
I'll jump in here. I'm Joshua Goldstein, I'm on the planning council. Two quick things. I echo Chris's comment about the local option, especially the rooms and meals. This is easy, low hanging fruit. And to your point, Laura, a $17 burger is gonna go up 17 cents. I, for one, every time I buy a burger, would be happy to throw 17 cents in the jar for this town. And I think the point, whether we live here or not, tourists or not, like, you're putting into your town. It's not bad. I mean, high tax rates aside, like a few extra pennies on the aggregate really adds up. My only comment about that one is I hope you two work together, and we've talked about it in planning council, figure out where that money's gonna go. Because if you do it and then there's this pot and everybody's fighting over it, like we tried to find like 3 areas where it could go, and that's just my encouragement to you. Regarding legislature, I'm really happy to hear that. I just want to plant this seed as that might germ. Todd has floated in Massachusetts when they blanket zoned the whole state. There was a qualification. We've done our hard work to create housing, and we've done a damn good job, I think. I'm testing aside. If you want to float an idea for this session, say like, hey, because I hope there's other towns that have been doing a good job, Brattleboro probably, some others, you know, that are on the come up. And if we can somehow by April say like, we already did it, you know, we don't qualify. It's gonna like, we've spent half a dozen years, as you all know, writing this zoning, and it's kind of, the wrinkles are out of it. To throw it in the trash can is a kick in the gut, as you say, Tom, but it's a kick somewhere else. Okay, to redo it all, and then it may change again. So if you get those guys in a room or you're testifying, say like, hey, we've done our work, what other towns have done it, and try to fly that flag. That's my idea.
So if we did have a local option tax, it would go to the town, I assume.
If it's in your charter.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
in our
Depending on
charter.
whose charter it's in.
All right.
I believe, I'm not an expert on this, but that's how I believe it would work.
Right. Charter first, vote of the residents to first vote a local option tax, vote on a town charter. And then the town charter would go to the legislature for approval. Anything else? No? You need to make a motion. We didn't really make a motion to start. Do we need to make a motion? No, there's not. Okay, well, if there's nothing else.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much for putting this together.
Maybe thank you.
Eat food before you leave. Judy's gonna be disappointed.